Right. Hello, so I'm Rob. I was introduced as a climate activist, and well, as Pat said, I'm just an ordinary person, but I'm a very practical person. So if something needs doing, I do it, and I think that's amazing that there's so many people here who've just seen that something needs doing and actually get on and do it, because that's what makes a difference, really. So a lot of the people who advocate fracking and so on say, well, the sun doesn't shine all the time, what about the wind when it doesn't blow and so on, and that's sort of one of their main arguments, is that renewables can't do it. So hopefully what I can do is sort of get across the message that actually they can. It's very possible, and it's not even any new technology. It's been around for years, and we're quite capable of surviving without fossil fuels. And the only thing that's lacking really is the will to do so, is the political leadership and the problems with companies with vested interest in fossil fuels. So I've kind of got some low-tech slides here. I'll leave them here at the end so you can look at them. But this is a nice one. This shows, this big red square there is how much solar energy hits the Earth every, year or every day, in fact, or whatever. And the little one is the amount of wind energy available. And if you probably can't see it, there's a tiny little red square there, which is our total global energy consumption. And in fact, there's about 6,000 times more solar energy every day or whatever than we could possibly use. And of course, the trick is to actually harness it and to use it, and the same with wind power. And in fact, that's really quite possible. For example, just a small proportion of the world's deserts could supply enough solar energy to power the whole world. So I think it's about 4% could power Europe. And that includes all the cars and heating and everything. And that's actually happening. It's underway, for example, with solar energy. There's two principal types of solar energy. There's solar PV, photovoltaic, which a lot of us maybe have on our roofs, and that produces electricity which you can use directly. And another sort of energy is concentrated solar power, and that's where they use banks of mirrors, for example, to focus the sun's rays on a tower, heat something up really hot, and that can be used to power generators and so on. And they can also use them with parabolic mirrors. I didn't quite have a slide of that. But it's there. This has been around for years. There's wind energy. That's coming down in cost. We're putting a lot of energy at sea. We've got offshore wind. And in fact, there's another plot here that shows that in Europe we've got the best wind resources in Europe. We've got huge amount offshore and onshore of the dark blue on here, which is the best places. And yet until recently we were lagging way behind in our use of this. So these huge resources that are there that we can use. So of course we can capture it. There's other things, as geothermal, for example, in Southampton. They've had geothermal energy had it there for at least a decade, and it supplies power to about 1,000 homes. So here geothermal's quite small, haven't got much potential, but that's another big thing. Tidal energy is starting to take off in Scotland. So we've got these huge resources that we can use. So we've got the technology to capture the energy, and the next thing is how can we store it. So for example, with the concentrated solar power, this is used, what they're doing now, they can use it to heat, for example, salt up to about 500 degrees centigrade, and then that can then drive steam generators to generate electricity in the normal way. But you can also store it. You can have these big silos of molten salt, and basically during the night, when the sun's not there, they can use it to generate power. And there's already quite a few power stations using that can give 24/7 supply. So for example, in southern Spain and in Africa, there's, in the Sahara, there's quite a few places that can do that. So you've got the capability to capture the energy, you've got the capability to store it, and the other thing is to transmit it to where it's needed. So for example, here we've got a lot of wind energy, sometimes too much to use, whereas in the Sahara they've got more solar energy they can use. So that is also proven technology. You've got high voltage direct current grids, transmission lines that are now building up. And for example, here is another thing, and there's all these red lines are links, say there's ones between UK and France and Belgium, I think it is, or it might be Holland and Ireland, and there's ones proposed to Iceland and Norway, and there's also some under development from North Africa. So basically all that energy that is produced can then be distributed to where it's needed. So if there's too much wind here, we can't cope. I think you've probably seen in the news, you get situations where there's too much wind power, so we can ship it other places. And the thing about high voltage direct current transmission lines is they're very low loss, so you can transmit it thousands of miles without much loss. Another thing coming up is super capacitors. They're so the problem, say, with electric cars and so on, is the weight of the batteries and things like that. So at the moment we can't really have battery-driven commercial vehicles, battery-driven buses, and they're developing supercapacitors that you can charge up really quickly. They're a lot lighter, they're lower cost, and so on. So there's all these new technologies coming online that can just make it very simple to transition to a fossil-free future. So how can we achieve it? Well, it's happening already. As I said, it's more political and things, the problems. But for example, Saudi Arabia, one of the world's leading oil producers, is actually investing 50 billion in renewable energy because they see they're going to run out of oil. They need to do that. Also places like Morocco, United Arab Emirates and things like that, and Tunisia. So they're transitioning to renewables, and in fact they're in a prime location to do that with solar. There's been a lot of studies on this, and for example, Zero Carbon Britain shows how we can achieve zero carbon within 20 years. And the thing about that surprised me is how simple it is. It's not like we have to go back to a primitive existence. So for example, this shows how much travel we do. And to do that, we just have to reduce by less than half, on average, the amount of car use. So if you're commuting every day, that's not too bad. You could car share, and that's it straight away. So it's not huge changes we need to do to achieve this. It's quite achievable and quite straightforward. So that's it really. It's just about making it happen. Great, thanks.